This was supposed to be the showdown. The number 1 seed versus the number 2 seed. John Morant versus Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. All that good stuff. This is what this game was supposed to be. But as the weekend unfolded, John Morant went down. Brandon Clark, Zach Edey, Jake LaRavia. And the Grizzlies were shorthanded and played like a shorthanded team. And Oklahoma City did what the number 1 seed was supposed to do. Tough loss for the Grizzlies. We got a lot to talk about. The injury latest and the Dorian Finney-Smith sweepstake. He ends up with the Lakers. What happened on the Grizzlies side? Let's talk about it coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me each and every single day. It was a rough weekend, but you know what? Things happen. The Grizzlies lost against the Oklahoma City Thunder to end the weekend, 130-106. As we mentioned in the intro, a lot of Grizzlies players were missing in that game, so you know, that happens, but they also had another win since we've been here. They beat the Pelicans 132-124. A lot of things happened in that game that we got to discuss as well. But before we get into all those things, remember that your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Grizzlies Daily Newsletter, your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. Well, let's get into this game. First, good job from the Grizzlies winning against the Pelicans, 132-124. Feisty Pelicans team. The record, shows that they're probably one of the worst teams in the league, but the talent level of Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, they got some players over there. DeJounte Murray as well, but they're missing two big guns. They're missing Brandon Ingram. They're missing Zion Williamson. Basically, was shorthanded. Grizzlies took advantage. And then Sunday, things flipped for the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies became the shorthanded team. And you remember at the Thursday show, we expected John Morant. We expected all these different guys, to potentially be available that weren't. Just before game time, we found out John Morant would be playing. Well, not just before game time. The day before the game, Saturday, we found out John Morant wouldn't be playing against OKC on Sunday. Then, shortly before game time, I'd say we found out a couple hours before the game, Zach Edey was unavailable. Then a little bit less than that, maybe an hour before the game, we found out that Brandon Clark wouldn't be available. In addition to Santi Aldama, Marcus Smart, and all those injuries. So we're going to get into the injuries in the second segment and kind of break down just where these guys are individually. But in the first segment, we've got to recap the game against Oklahoma City because, again, the Pelicans win just feels so far removed from what all has happened. The OKC one is the one that we're going to focus on. And the first thing that stood out to me when watching that game, we talk about all the players that were missing, was the turnovers. 21 turnovers from the Grizzlies turned into 33 points. The players after the game, if you ask them, Desmond Bane talked about it. Some other guys talked about it as well. I know Taylor Jenkins talked about it somewhat. The turnovers were a problem. The Grizzlies had 21 turnovers in this game as a team. And quite frankly, it's hard to win. It's hard to win that way, especially against a good team, a team that's going to take advantage. I think pretty much every rotation player had a turnover for the Grizzlies. The only players that didn't have a turnover were Yugi Kawamura and Colin Castleton, your two-way guys. But other than that, you got 4 turnovers from Luke Kennard. You got 4 from Scottie Pippen Jr. You got a couple, from Desmond Bane. You got 3 from Jaren Jackson Jr. It wasn't just one guy who overly turned the basketball over. It was a bunch of different guys, and pretty much everyone chipped in, to their share of turnovers. But the turnovers were a problem in this game, 21 of them. A part of it was the Thunder's defense, which we'll talk about a little bit more here in a second. But look, here's the thing about the Grizzlies offense with all these injuries. And I want to talk about this in the first segment, because in the second segment, we're going to talk more about specifically what's going on with those guys. But when you're missing Ja Morant, Jake LaRavia left this game, by the way, with an ankle injury, did not return, played around 14 minutes. But when you're missing Ja Morant, Jake LaRavia, uh, I mean, Santi Aldama, so many guys, not just Ja is the ultimate playmaker, right? Ja is a guy, when he's on the floor, the team is instantly better from a playmaking standpoint. But Santi Aldama and Jake LaRavia in particular, and there are more. Marcus Smart is another one. These guys are some of the better so-called connectors on the team. And what I mean by connectors is these are your best secondary facilitators. These are the players where we're casually watching the game. We don't really applaud them for these type of things as much, but when they're with the Grizzlies and teams rewatching the film, the Grizzlies are looking at which players can drive the basketball, cause attention to the paint, draw the defense in, kick it out. Who's making that extra pass to the extra pass that's giving this team open looks and open shots? Santi Aldama, Jake LaRavia have been two of the better connectors on this team. And basically, the easier way to think of them is secondary facilitators. So when you get past the trio of Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, and Scottie Pippen Jr. as the team's leaders in assists, you're pretty much missing a big chunk of the next few guys. Vince Williams hasn't played much this year, but he's in that group of players who, when he's been active, he is one of the best kind of secondary facilitators that the Grizzlies have. So you got him. Again, going back to you got Marcus Smart, who's averaging close to 4 assists per game. Jake LaRavia, over 3 assists per game going into that game. And then, of course, Santi Aldama as well, who's had a bunch of games where he's had like 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and things like that. But the point that I'm making is, outside of those guys, you got Luke Kennard, who's, I think, is solid secondary facilitator as well. But then it's a big drop-off after that group. So it's Jaren Jackson Jr., Jalen Wells, John Conchar, and those guys just they all average under 2 assists per game. So the point that I'm making is there's a ripple effect here. Whereas when Ja's missed games in the past, you've had Scottie Pippen, Desmond Bane, you've had Jake LaRavia and Santi Aldama as good secondary facilitators that keep the ball moving, and the offense kind of keeps this nice steady flow. It was hard for them to get in the flow simply because, you're not going to rely on Scottie Pippen Jr. and Desmond Bane to do all your assist work. Not in an offense that prides itself on ball movement and constant cutting in motion like this offense does. So with that being said, when you don't have Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, Vince Williams, Santi Aldama, basically after your best 3 assist guys, your next 4 were out. Jake LaRavia played some of this game, but again, that is tough, especially when you're going against a defense like Oklahoma City's. Physical. I think Brevin Knight pointed it out during the broadcast, talking about the individual talent on that defense, and that's what really makes them kind of stand apart as the number 1 ranked defense in the NBA. Shai Gilgeous, he can guard. Casey Wallace, he can guard. Jalen Williams can guard. Isaiah Hartenstein, he's fine being out on that island as a 7-footer. They can just throw a bunch of different guys at you, and then they come at you off the bench as well. So the fact that they have all these good defenders who are okay with switching and holding their own, you need players who can kind of create for themselves and kind of, get isolation buckets. And without some of the guys that the Grizzlies are missing, it's just tough. So that kind of was part of the problem. And the guy who is very good at isolation scoring, and as we talked about over the course of the season, is Jaren Jackson Jr. And he struggled. Jaren Jackson Jr. struggled. 3 of 17 shooting from the field against OKC. 0 of 6 on 3-pointers. In fact, I think he was 7 of 8 from the free throw line. That's kind of how he got most of his work. 5 rebounds in this game, 4 assists, had 4 fouls, 3 turnovers. So it was a bit of a struggle for Jaren Jackson Jr. overall. But again, going back to the injury front, and you can argue whether Jaren should be better than this or whatever the case may be, but here's what I just think it is. When Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't have the Brandon Clark and the Zach Edey alongside of him, and if you look at the 2-man net rating numbers, when Jaren Jackson Jr. is playing alongside of Brandon Clark or Zach Edey, they are double-digit points better than opponents per 100 possessions. Both, either player, they both double digits. Like, it's clearly when Jaren Jackson Jr. is in the lineup with Brandon Clark or Zach Edey, it's when the Grizzlies are at their best. And the reason for that is I use Zach Edey because he's the easier example, but it works for Brandon Clark as well. But because his net rating with Zach Edey is even higher than the one with Brandon Clark. But here's the thing: when you have Zach Edey in the game and you have Jaren Jackson Jr., not too many front courts, power forwards, and centers can match the physicality that those two bring together. And what that means is a lot of times when you see a 7'4" center like Zach Edey, you're going to have to put your biggest defender, your tallest defender, probably your most physical defender on him. And a lot of teams don't have another defender who's as physical, who's physical enough in that starting group to handle Jaren Jackson Jr. So 9 times out of 10, there are some few exceptions in the league. 9 times out of 10, Jaren's going to be matched up against a mismatch, and he gets the feast on the offensive end. And then on the defensive end, they could do some other things as well. But take this game in particular against OKC, because this is a great example. Coming into this game, it felt like, oh, yeah, this is a Jaren Jackson Jr. type game. Zach Edey, Isaiah Hartenstein, those two will be duking it out, right? They're going to be battling. And what you're going to see is you're going to see guys like Jalen Williams. You're going to see guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort. Those are the type of guys that are going to have to deal with Jaren Jackson Jr. They're all too short. And granted, OKC has done a great job this season as a small ball team, not taking anything away from them. When Isaiah Hartenstein leaves the game, when Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein were both out, they held their own. But with all that being said, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a guy who has feasted against smaller opponents all season long. So the point that I'm making is now that you don't have Zach Edey available, now that you don't have Brandon Clark available, now you put Jaren Jackson Jr. starting at the 5, John Conchar at the 4. OKC says, oh, this plays right into our hand. So now instead of Isaiah Hartenstein had to battle with Brandon Clark or having to battle, with Zach Edey, fine, we could just throw Isaiah Hartenstein, our 7-foot physical defender, onto Jaren Jackson Jr. And now we're matched up size-wise where the Grizzlies don't have that advantage. One of their bigger advantages that they have on this team is their physicality and size in the front court. So that's taken away with the losses of Brandon Clark and Zach Edey. So some people may say, oh, well, why did they start Jay Huff? Jay Huff and Jaren Jackson Jr. net rating when they're on the floor is negative this season so far. So he doesn't present the same physicality that you get from, a Zach Edey, that you get from a Brandon Clark. But all in all, that game is a wash, man. I mean, that's not a game you expect the Grizzlies to win. And look, OKC was missing a couple guys too. Look, I'm not acting like they were fully healthy. Like they were missing Chet, they were missing Alex Caruso. But I don't think anyone is arguing which team was missing more value in this game. It's clearly the Grizzlies. So we'll see how those two, maybe in February when they play again, it'll be a little bit more evenly matched. So looking forward to when those two face each other again. But coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to see about these injuries. We got to talk about these injuries. What's the latest on all these guys? When could they be back? We're going to talk about that coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, this episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. No, nobody will know. So with Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you could get your free prescription today. Visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. With Rocket RX, you'll take longer than 2 minutes. But right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use Locked On NBA in all caps. That's rocketrx.com with the code Locked On NBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions apply. Rocket RX, better sex made simple. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, let's talk about the injuries. Well, I mean, it kind of felt like last season a little bit, right? No Ja, no, Santi, no Zach Edey. So you're, a smaller team again. And it was a struggle. Like the Grizzlies, this was one of the few times this season where the Grizzlies just felt like, well, they looked undermanned. Like even when they lost early in the season to Houston, you can say, oh, they didn't match Houston's physicality, um, and whatever the case may be. And some of the other losses, like the loss to the Bulls, you felt like they would respond the next time they played them. The two losses early this season to the Nets, they responded in those. You still felt like they were the more talented team. This one was, yeah, you really didn't expect much. Like not with everybody out, not with the way that OKC plays at home. Like OKC's just really good, and OKC doesn't play with its food. So all that was expected, but the Grizzlies aren't always going to be undermanned like that. And the question right now is how long until they get some of these guys back? We're going to start with the most obvious one and the most pressing one, I guess you would say, and that's Ja Morant. Right now, we don't know the timeline on when Ja Morant will be back and how long that will be. He has an AC sprain in his shoulder. So if you saw him during the OKC game, he had his arm was in a sling. From what I've been told, some of that can just be cautionary measures. It doesn't mean that he's out for the rest of the season or anything like that. So the Grizzlies are doing further evaluation there with Ja. Once they know more, we'll know more, and that's when we kind of get the clarity on what this timeline could be like for Ja Morant over the next week, couple weeks, or whatever the case may be going forward for him. But it's a tough blow for the Grizzlies, of course, especially in this stretch of games. You don't want to be without Ja Morant. You don't want to be without Ja Morant as you get ready to go against, the Suns on the road, the Kings on the road, the Warriors on the road. Then you come back home. You got the Mavs. They're going to be without Luka, but they've been really good without Luka this season. Then you get the Rockets again. So it's tough. It's the Western Conference, but it's a tough time to be playing without your star point guard, and it also kind of hurts a couple, potential accolades for Ja. It hurts his chances at making the All-Star game. It also hurts his chances at making All-NBA. Ja Morant at this point of the season now has missed 13 games. You can't miss more than 17 games and be able to qualify for All-NBA. So basically, he's only allowed to miss 4 more games if he wants to make All-NBA or potentially qualify for that. And again, player in Ja's position, he wants to win a championship. I could answer that question for you, but it's just pointing out the mere facts of the situation. That's kind of how that rounds up. Moving on to the other guys, Zach Edey and Brandon Clark, two guys that kind of popped up on the injury report, and it was a difference, right? You go back to that game against the Thunder, and one thing that easily stands out is, the Grizzlies, it felt like that would be their advantage, size, and then the game plays out, and surely, the Grizzlies ended up with a 51-45 rebounding edge overall, but it didn't feel like they controlled the glass over the course of the game. John Conchar, 15 rebounds in this game. I'll be sure to point that out to Joe Mullinax, but that's neither here nor there. The point is with Zach Edey. So after the Pelicans game, Taylor Jenkins basically said that Zach Edey took a blow in that game, and after the game, the next day, I guess he brought it to the attention of the medical staff, things like that. They talked it over, decided to put him in concussion protocol. So the thing about NBA concussion protocol, it does not mean that he has a concussion. If he does, then that's a whole nother step to the protocol. It's just pretty much precautionary measures at this point. If you're watching the game, you didn't see him, on the bench. That's part of the concussion protocol or whatever the case may be. So we'll know more kind of on where he is. But right now, everything is just precautionary with him. The Grizzlies just wanted to take those steps. It was from a hit in the Pelicans game. He stayed in the game, kept playing. But I guess after a night's sleep, whatever the case may be, there was some pain there, and the Grizzlies felt the need to keep him out of the game. Brandon Clark, as of this moment, I haven't heard that it's anything serious, but I think the fact that he was a late downgrade to out, he was questionable pretty much leading up to close into the game. I think that bodes well for his playing chances going forward. So what I'm believing is Brandon Clark and Zach Edey, neither of those things should be anything long-term, which means a lot because we just talked about Jaren Jackson Jr. and how well he plays alongside of those dudes. So if you can get those two back, you could at least feel like you have an advantage being one of the best and bigger front courts in the NBA against no matter who you play against at that point. Santi Aldama and Marcus Smart, the Grizzlies also gave some timelines on when we could probably expect those guys, or have just more, more of an indication of when they'll be back. Santi Aldama is listed as week to week with his ankle sprain, so um, week to week can be a couple weeks, and I'll be on the trip a little bit later. I'll get out there in Sacramento, so I'll be able to see Santi myself, and then I'll give you guys more of what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing at that point when I get on the road trip. But Santi Aldama is listed as week to week, whereas Marcus Smart has a partial tear in his right index finger, and he will be reevaluated in 2 weeks, and that's important because if you remember when he had the last injury on his hand. When they say reevaluations with these hand injuries, from my understanding, is he's not going to do much until that reevaluation standpoint. So basically, they're basically just telling him stay off the hand, don't do much with the hand, and then in a couple weeks they'll see how much it's healed, they'll see how much he's going to be able to do, and then there will be another update that comes after that. So to put it plain, to put it simple, Mark Smart ain't about to be back. Not right now. not the next couple weeks, and then there's going to be some additional time tacked on top of that when he has to do basketball activity and whatnot. So tough blow for Marcus Smart. It's a tough blow in general for the Grizzlies because this guy it's been hard to get him in the rhythm with this team. Like last season, you talked about 21 games played for Marcus Smart with the Grizzlies. Now this season, it's a tough blow, and this is why people have the questions, right? Should Marcus Smart be traded, or how much he means to the Grizzlies, or what he means to the Grizzlies? It's because we just don't know. We don't get to see it enough. We have not seen him play prolonged stretches with the Grizzlies to the point where it feels like he is a guy that you 100% trust to be on this roster past the trade deadline up until the playoffs or whatever the case may be. But that's kind of the updates of where those guys are. As of this point, there's nothing overly long-term. That's why I said maybe when these teams play again in February, it'll be a little bit more evenly matched on that point. So hopefully so. But we'll continue again. I'm going to be on the road trip here. I'm going to miss the next game in Phoenix, but I'll be out there for Sacramento, for Golden State. So once I get out there, I'll be able to get more boots on the ground, have some more updates for y'all as well on the status of those players. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, the Grizzlies missed out on Dorian Finney-Smith, but there was a lot of movement over the weekend and conversations about what happened there. Let's talk about that here coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies. Dorian Finney-Smith is a Los Angeles Laker. Yeah, the Lakers got him. And quite frankly, if you saw some of the reports out there, people were saying, oh, the Grizzlies are in pursuit and things like that. And there was reported interest on both sides, Grizzlies trying to get Dorian Finney-Smith. It all made sense. He made sense as a defensive wing, defensive standout. He's going to go to the Lakers, solid fit. The Lakers ended up trading like D'Angelo Russell, Maxwell Lewis, young prospect as well. So, it was a nice package. There were some reported offers out there from the Grizzlies side, nothing that I've confirmed on my own, but there was a reported offer of, I believe it was John Conchar, Luke Kennard, and a protected first-round pick. So you be the judge of which one of those is a better offer. In my personal opinion, if I'm the Nets, and I feel like why the Nets sided more with the D'Angelo Russell offer is simply because they get more relief. They get more cap relief. They get more, salary relief. Whereas with the Grizzlies deal, John Conchar, again, I talked about it a couple times, but when he got the extension, when John Conchar got that extension, I was wondering why the Grizzlies did it at that time. And now you're in a situation where certain teams they might be interested because it's a very good value deal, for John Conchar. But at the same time, it's 3 years left on that deal. And you're talking about a team like the Nets where they could say, hey, we get D'Angelo Russell this, 1 year or whatever, and boom, we create some space. It makes more sense for them. So I think that's what they sided with, along in addition to, I think, The Lakers sent them 3 second-round picks. So 3 second-round picks or protected first, it's probably 3 second-round picks. Lakers, they upped the ante to go get Dorian Finney-Smith. But my personal take, and this will probably come with some controversy, but whatever. That's what we do this for. Wasn't really a big deal to me. If you've noticed, you've probably heard, and Joe Monex, shout out to my co-host, he's talked a lot about how, in the past I've been kind of a Dorian Finney-Smith guy and things like that. And it's true. Last season, and I think maybe even the year before that, like, this is a guy that's been on the trade radar for a little minute now, and he's always made sense. But the roster is different now, and what I mean by that is the reason I'm not tripping out over the Grizzlies missing out on Dorian Finney-Smith, because I don't think that the value, meaning the cost, what he costed, if the Grizzlies would have had to part ways with 3 second-round picks, or if they would have had to, whatever, however you want to, like Santi Aldama, for example. Like, I think that would have probably been the equivalent of them giving out D'Angelo Russell in that case. But the point that I'm making is I don't think that Dorian Finney-Smith outweighed what the Grizzlies already have in-house enough for me to go that overbearing with an offer. And you might say, who we're talking about in-house? I'm talking about just 2 guys. I'm not talking about any other guy. I'm talking about 2 players, and that's it. I'm talking about Jalen Wells. I'm talking about Vince Williams Jr. I'm not talking about, like Gigi Jackson, because, again, we'll see Gigi Jackson kind of move around from the 3 and the 4, and Gigi might be the long-term 3. Like, it's very possible. I love watching Gigi at the 4 because of the mismatches that he causes, at that position. But anyways, so just got to put that out there. This ain't anything about Gigi. Gigi, that's a bucket. Most of you know how I feel about that. But what this is more about is the fact that you talk about 3-and-D wings, guys who are going to be able to guard, guys who can knock down some shots without taking shots from your star players. Dorian Finney-Smith is one of the better guys in the league at doing that, and he played on the Western Conference Finals team with the Mavs. He's won playoff games, playing that type of role. He's shooting a career-high 43.3%, I think, from three-point range this year. But guess what? I'm okay with saying, hey, look, it's Jalen Wells' rookie year. Sure, he just had a tough game. Jalen Wells shot 2 of 12, in this game against OKC. So you say, oh, look, competition ramps up. It's tough on the rook. But at the same time, I'm saying I don't think Dorian Finney-Smith is that much better than Jalen Wells and Vince Williams Jr. to the point where I'm making that much better of an offer than the Los Angeles Lakers in this case. Vince Williams Jr. is the guy that I'm really betting on. Most of you know this is a guy I've been high on for a while. I believe when you talk about defensive potential, he has it. Kevin Durant has complimented him. Luka Doncic has complimented his defense. We saw him, I think it was his 2nd game back this season. No, it was his 1st game back. His 1st game back, he had to guard Steph Curry. Came right in the game. Taylor Jenkins threw him on Steph Curry. And he wasn't even 100% yet from that injury. This was me talking to him. Myself, he told me, I'm not all the way back yet. The point that I'm making is, if Vince Williams Jr., it's been a lot of missed time. You talk about March, as much rehab as he's done since March. If he gets back fully to that player in that trajectory that he was on, I don't think you miss much. I'm not saying that Vince Williams or Jalen Wells in this playoff run will be better than Dorian Finney-Smith. And I know that's what everybody wants. It's what can you do for this Grizzlies team right now. But is the difference enough? Because I don't think Dorian Finney-Smith is your final piece to get you a championship. Because if he's the final piece to get you a championship, I think you can do it with Vince Williams Jr. and Jalen Wells. That's my point. Because if you look at the areas that the Grizzlies struggle in, we're talking about half-court offense. We're talking about creators. You don't think of Dorian Finney-Smith as a creator. Now, he's going to play defense, right? He's going to guard 2s. He's going to guard 3s. He's going to guard 4s. I'm okay with seeing Vince Williams guard those same players or when he's healthy and whatnot. So, again, did I want the Grizzlies to get Dorian Finney-Smith? Yeah. But this isn't a huge loss. This is not a huge loss, in my opinion. He's averaging 10 points a game. He's having a career year shooting the three-pointer. Like, this is not a 20-point per game guy that the Grizzlies are missing out on. Again, at this point, the guy that I would turn my attention to, and again, we'll see how these next few weeks kind of shape up for the Grizzlies, because that's going to determine to me how aggressive they should be. And if they continue to play really well without Ja Morant, without some of these other guys, if they continue to play really well, then you go get Cam Johnson, because there's multiple years left on that contract. And that is a certified shooter who's been to the NBA Finals and shot it at a high level throughout an entire playoff run. So Cam Johnson is the one guy that I would, go get, because I think there is a level up when you talk about shooting and 3-and-D potential there. Like Vince Williams and Jalen Wells, very capable players. Cam Johnson has been there, done that, and he's high volume 3-point shooting. Dorian Finney-Smith, much more lower volume. He's going to take the open shots. Not much creativity to his game. But I think Cam Johnson, you get a little bit more of those things. They're saying right now that the Nets may be asking for a first and some additional draft compensation, maybe even a couple firsts. We'll see how all that shakes out. Joe Mullinax, we'll break some of that down, as the weeks go on. But at the end of the day, I feel like the aggressiveness of the Grizzlies should depend on what this team plays like over the next few weeks as well. So that's kind of how I feel on Dorian Finney-Smith. I know some people were, the Lakers got him. Like, he's the big fish out there. Like, my point is, y'all really must forget what Vince Williams is capable of. Like, he hasn't played a lot of NBA games, and Jalen Wells hasn't played a lot of NBA games. I get it, but I just don't think there's that big of a difference from what Vince Williams can be for you in a playoff run and what Dorian Finney-Smith is in a playoff run. But thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies on today. Make sure you continue to tune in everywhere, not just here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. Locked On Grizzlies is there, so make sure you continue to tune in via all those platforms, listening platforms as well. Me and Joe Mullinax will be back with you on tomorrow's episode, and we're going to have some more injury stuff to break down. Could a couple of these guys be back? Just stay tuned. We'll talk more about that on tomorrow's episode. But until then, remember, as I just said, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.